Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Commander Duffy, thank you for your testimony, for being here, your leadership, and the team that sits to your right and your left. I'm going into my 5th year serving on the House Veterans Affairs Committee. And to the degree that we've been successful and responsive, it is in large part thanks to the guidance and direction that we've received from your team and the members back in Texas, and especially in El Paso, the community I have the honor to serve and to represent. One of the bills that we have written recently, along with Senator Murphy, tries to address the access to mental health gap that we have in so many of our communities. And it's critical in El Paso, Texas, where when we surveyed, more than 1/3 of veterans in our community are unable, even after repeated attempts, to gain a mental health care appointment. And we know that care delayed becomes care denied and has some very negative outcomes, suffering at a minimum and worse in the worst cases. Senator Murphy and I wrote a bill that would ensure that those who have other than honorable discharges are able to immediately access mental health care. VFW was instrumental in providing guidance and feedback on this. I'd love to get your thoughts and those who sit with you on the panel on other ways that we can address the veteran suicide crisis in this country, which I think should be priority number 1 for our VA. I know it's been a priority for the VFW, and I'd love to get your thoughts and your guidance on this.
Thank you, sir. And as you know, it's a special project, not just for the VFW, but for the veteran community and for the community outside of the veterans that I spoke about earlier. One of the areas that I think would be very useful is leveraging, especially in the rural areas, is leveraging telemedicine. Being able to use telemedicine when you can't have a face-to-face session. I think that would be very valuable. But one of the limitations to telemedicine is we have a limitation restriction of interstate telemedicine. So if I have a telemedicine site in the border of Texas and the patient is in Oklahoma, unless they're on federal grounds, we can't use telemedicine for anything. But it would be very useful, I think, in the rural areas to be able to exploit and to use telemedicine in a very positive way. Another one would be to develop a robust peer-to-peer program, similar to hospitals use it for, in the civilian side, they use it for when perhaps they have somebody come in with, what comes to mind quite honestly is a sexual trauma and some other, where the hospitals know that they can call trained peer-to-peer volunteers. I think the same thing could possibly be used to help, and I think it would be possibly very valuable in, again, to get past the limitations, the tyranny of distance in the rural areas. If you could develop a team of a peer-to-peer or a system of peer-to-peer well-trained volunteers. So those are a couple that come to mind off the top of my head, sir.
Let me ask one more question on a different subject, one that you were discussing with Mr. Sullivan as I walked in. The rate of small business ownership by World War II veterans, I think, was just around 50%. The rate of small business ownership among post 9/11 veterans is around 4%. In Houston, Texas, I met with some folks at Combined Arms who really talk about the potential that we can unleash in our veterans community in creating more jobs. Met with Bunker Labs in Austin, Texas, which are already starting veterans on an entrepreneurial path. Your thoughts on using post 9/11 GI Bill benefits to allow veterans to start businesses, or other ways that we unleash that entrepreneurship in the veterans community?
As far as using the post 9/11 GI Bill for an entrepreneurial, we'd have to study that. But right off the top of my head, I would be very fearful that there would be some predatory grabs on those on that particular program. Boy, we'd need to really study that one. But the hair on the back of my head says no, no. Post 9/11 GI Bill was there for the purpose of higher education. I think there's other ways to do that through the Small Business Administration, to start programs there to add to the catalog of what's available to veterans. But to use the post 9/11 GI Bill as a way to fund an entrepreneurial experiment, no.
Appreciate it. Thanks for your feedback. And again, thanks for being here, your advocacy and your leadership. And I will yield back to the chair.